Rain soaked the Manhattan pavement in the way it always did on the first day of something new. Claire West had long since stopped romanticizing the city, but she still noticed the small ironies, like the way the clouds chose to open up just as she reached the revolving doors of Halston and Pierce. Her coat clung to her shoulders, damp and chilled, as she tucked her reusable coffee cup under one arm and stepped inside. The lobby gleamed white marble, modern lighting glass that stretched forever upward. People moved fast as if punctuality was stitched into their suits. Claire was used to being invisible in places like this, but today wasn't about invisibility. Today, she had to make a first impression. Her heels clicked crisply on the floor as she approached the front desk. The receptionist gave her a perfunctory once-over, already typing before Claire spoke. "I'm here for the executive operations consultant role," she said, brushing a curl back behind her ear. "Claire West." The receptionist blinked at her screen. "Ah, yes, you're assigned to Mr. Bennett's floor, 34th, they're expecting you." Claire nodded, not correcting the assumption. Not yet. Let them think what they wanted for now. It was the CEO who needed correcting, eventually. The elevator swished open with a quiet chime. She rode up in a mirrored silence, watching her own reflection soften in the overhead light, 34 floors of space and glass and money. She reminded herself she wasn't intimidated. She'd rebuilt her life with less than this and for far more important reasons. When the elevator opened, a woman with a headset appeared almost immediately, her voice clipped and efficient. "Claire West?" she asked, walking at a brisk pace before Claire could reply. "Mr. Bennett has a 9 o'clock meeting, so you'll need to get settled quickly. He prefers his assistants to be 2 steps ahead." "Assistant?" Claire smiled to herself, adjusting the strap on her leather bag. "Thank you, I understand." The woman gestured to a sleek desk just outside the corner office. "You'll be here. His coffee should be on his desk before he arrives." The office door swung open then. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, in a too-large blazer darted out, nearly colliding with Claire's legs. "Jack," someone called sharply. A man followed, mid-30s, tall, storm-gray suit, eyes the exact color of rain on pavement. He looked down at Claire like she was a replacement part for a malfunctioning machine. "You must be the new assistant," he said. "Please make sure the conference room is prepped by 9:15, and let legal know I'll need a draft of the Revell proposal by EOD." Claire stared at him, taking in the faint circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he was holding his son's backpack like it was a foreign object. Something tugged in her chest, not pity, recognition. "I'm Claire West," she said, her tone light but direct. "Executive Operations Consultant. You requested someone to streamline internal communications and executive workflow across your departments. That's me." He blinked, taken aback. "You're not my assistant." "No, but I brought coffee," she added, holding out a second cup, the one she'd picked up from the bakery downstairs after doing a bit of research on what this particular CEO liked. Dark roast, no sugar, no cream. He looked at the cup, then at her. Jack tugged on his sleeve. "Can I have a muffin?" "I told you to stay in the office," he muttered, glancing between his son and Claire, suddenly caught between two unmanageable elements. Claire crouched down, eye level with the boy. "You like blueberry or chocolate chip?" The boy gave her a suspicious look. "Chocolate chip." "Excellent choice," she stood. "There's one in my bag. I'll grab it for you after I've found your dad's conference room." There was a pause. Claire could feel the air shift slightly, as if this floor, this man, wasn't quite sure how to categorize her anymore. She offered a smile to Mr. Bennett. "You'll find my onboarding packet already contains a week 1 plan and a departmental audit schedule, but I'm happy to check with legal and prep the room as needed. I'm here to help, not to correct." Then she turned, placed the coffee on his desk, and began her day. What Claire didn't see, as she disappeared into the hall with the soft confidence of someone who understood people better than hierarchies, was that Daniel Bennett didn't look away right away. He stared at the coffee, then at his son, still standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Come on," he said, voice lower now. "Let's get your muffin." Jack hesitated. "I like her." Daniel didn't respond, but when he finally turned to follow, there was something unreadable in his expression. Something slightly cracked open, like a door left ajar. By noon, Claire had mapped out the workflow inefficiencies between the PR and legal departments, started reformatting the executive summary templates, and unearthed a software subscription that the company was still paying for, even though it hadn't been used in 11 months. She was also beginning to suspect that the CEO's world was in quiet chaos. The first clue had been the child. The second had been the fact that Daniel Bennett never took lunch, didn't smile, and only looked people in the eye when it was absolutely necessary. The third came at 2:47 p.m. when she found him alone in his glass-walled office, staring at a photo tucked inside a drawer he thought no one could see. Claire knocked once. Marketing called, they need a sign-off on the fall campaign rollout. Also, I have your son's drawing. He looked up, startled, quickly shutting the drawer. My what? She held up a folded piece of paper, crayon on printer paper, a sketch of a tall stick man and a small stick kid next to something resembling a dinosaur. He said it was for your wall. Daniel took it slowly and looked at it like it might burn. You don't have to put it up, she said, setting a folder on his desk, but he thought it might make your office nicer. He didn't respond. Claire turned to leave, already halfway through the door, when his voice stopped her. You're very good at this, he said softly. She turned, brows raised. This job, the people part. Claire smiled, thank you. He looked at her, eyes steady. That's not in the consultant job description. No, she agreed, but sometimes the things that matter are. Outside the office, Claire checked her phone. A single photo of her daughter, Becca, popped up on the screen, 7 years old, gap-toothed, holding a frog in one hand and grinning like summer wasn't over yet. 2 weeks, Claire whispered to herself, we've got this. And for the first time in months, she almost believed it. The second morning came with less rain and more quiet. Claire arrived early, not out of obligation but habit. Early meant control, and control meant fewer surprises. She paused in the building's lobby just long enough to appreciate the emptiness before the wave of executives and assistants filtered in. This space was always loudest in the hours before decisions got made. After that, it became sterile again. She rode the elevator with a half-full coffee in one hand and her tote in the other. This time, she brought an extra muffin, just in case Jack was there again. When the doors opened on the 34th floor, the first thing she noticed was the sound of a voice, not Daniel, not any of the employees, but a child's, muffled, inquisitive. Claire followed the sound to the office just before the CEO's. Jack was sitting cross-legged on the floor beside a whiteboard, using dry erase markers like finger paint. Good morning, she said gently. He looked up, cheeks smudged with blue. I made a dragon, he announced. It eats boring meetings. Claire crouched beside him. I'll take 2, please. From behind the desk, Daniel appeared, blazer off, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked tired but less sharp around the edges than yesterday. I was supposed to drop him off at school, he said, not quite an apology. He spilled apple juice on his backpack and refused to go without it. Claire glanced at the backpack, now air-drying near a heater vent. Parenting negotiations, she said with a small nod. You win some, lose some. Daniel studied her for a beat, then returned to his laptop. I rescheduled the strategy meeting for 11. If you're sitting in, I'd like your perspective on departmental overlap. She stood slowly, brushing her palms against her skirt. Of course. He didn't say thank you, but she didn't expect him to. By mid-morning, Claire had set up a task-tracking dashboard for the executive team and quietly rerouted several meeting requests that had somehow all landed in Daniel's calendar without context. The man didn't delegate, he absorbed. He was at his desk again, back in CEO mode, when she knocked lightly on the frame. Legal flagged the Revel clause you wanted. Also, your son has turned the break room into a pirate ship. Daniel didn't even glance up. Tell facilities to burn it down. Claire folded her arms. I told him I'd help him turn it back into a kitchen before lunch. He looked at her then, brow furrowed. You don't have to babysit. I'm not, she said calmly. I'm offering stability in the form of routine. Kids crave it. Adults tend to forget they do, too. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, softly, "I'm not good at this part." Claire leaned against the doorframe. "Neither was I at first." He looked up, surprised. "I had Becca when I was 24. Her dad left 6 months later. My parents offered help, but it always came with lectures and judgment, so I figured it out, and I'm still figuring it out." Daniel stared at her, not with pity, not with interest exactly, but something quieter, like a person hearing a familiar language spoken for the first time in years. "Why come back to corporate?" he asked. "I needed the salary," she said, honest and unguarded. "And I missed using this part of my brain, but I don't miss being someone's assistant. Not that there's anything wrong with the role, it's just not what I'm here to be." He nodded once, understood. Claire turned to go, then paused. "You should try picking Jack up from school sometime. Not because you have to, but because you want to. He'll remember it." She left without waiting for a reply. The strategy meeting was tense. 6 directors, a poorly structured presentation, and too many competing interests. Claire didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. She watched. It wasn't until the CFO tried to sideline marketing's pitch again that she finally interjected. "If I may," Claire said, her tone even. "We have 3 overlapping initiatives all scheduled for Q3. If these departments continue to compete for funding instead of coordinating timelines, you'll get diminishing returns and a team that starts resenting each other." She looked at Daniel, who had gone very still. "You don't have a project problem, you have a communication problem." The room went quiet. Daniel tapped his pen once against his notepad. Agreed. After the meeting, he caught up to her in the hallway. "You were right." She raised a brow. "About?" "More than I want to admit." They stood there for a moment, among the rush of interns and analysts. "I didn't expect someone like you," he said. Claire gave a half-smile. "That's usually how the best things begin." That evening, as Claire packed up her things, she noticed something taped on the inside of her desk drawer. It was Jack's dragon, drawn in thick, messy strokes, teeth bared and wings spread. A note was scrawled beneath it in childish handwriting. "Miss Claire, thank you for not being boring." She laughed quietly. The elevator ride down was empty again. She welcomed the silence. Out on the sidewalk, the city hadn't changed. People still rushed, horns still blared, but she walked slower this time, her mind strangely full. At home, her daughter was waiting with stories about a loose tooth and a playground feud. Claire tucked her into bed, fingers smoothing wild curls from her forehead. "Did you have a good day at your new job?" Becca asked sleepily. Claire hesitated, then nodded. "I think I did." And somewhere, above the noise of it all, she could almost hear the sound of a door cracking open just a little wider. Claire had been at Halston and Pierce for 9 days when the team stopped assuming she was someone's assistant and started checking with her before making major decisions. She didn't demand authority, she just operated as if she already had it. There was no ego in the way she worked, just clarity, patience, and a quiet refusal to be underestimated. Daniel noticed it in the way meetings began shifting before he spoke, the way agendas landed on his desk already annotated, the way his son, who usually withdrew in office spaces, began asking if Miss Claire would be there when he visited. She never tried to take over, but somehow the place had started breathing differently with her in it. That morning Jack didn't come in. Claire asked casually while handing Daniel his coffee, this time with a lid that actually fit. "He went to school," Daniel said, accepting the cup. "Without a meltdown, I packed his lunch." Claire blinked, impressed, voluntarily. Daniel shrugged almost sheepishly. "There was bribery involved, a new sketchbook, and I sat with him while he did his shoes." Claire smiled at that. Those little moments matter. He met her eyes briefly. "I'm starting to get that." Later that afternoon, Claire found herself in the middle of a budget prioritization meeting gone sideways. 2 department heads were politely but firmly undermining each other, each convinced their division's goals deserved top billing. Claire waited until they paused for breath before she slid a 1-page analysis across the table. "This is where we're bleeding resources," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. Not in your departments, in the gaps between them. You're solving different problems with the same tools. Neither of you will win if we keep pretending there's only one ladder up. Daniel didn't speak for a full 5 seconds. Then, she's right, realign your scopes. Claire, draft a combined strategy doc. I want options by Friday. The meeting ended 5 minutes later, with both directors looking like they'd just witnessed a storm they hadn't prepared for. As the room cleared, Daniel stayed behind. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. You have a way of disarming people. I don't disarm, she said, gathering papers. I just make it harder for people to hide behind their titles. He tilted his head, including me. She glanced up, eyes steady, especially you. There was a silence between them, not awkward, but thick with something unspoken. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and sighed. Jack's school, he said. He got into a scuffle with another kid over a lunchbox. They want me to come in. Claire hesitated. Do you want me to go with you? Daniel didn't answer right away. Then softly, would you? The school was tucked into a quiet street, a far cry from the towering cityscape they'd left behind. Inside, it smelled like construction paper and worn sneakers. The principal greeted them with a practiced smile that faltered slightly when she saw Claire. Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming. Jack's in the guidance room. We just wanted to talk through what happened. Daniel nodded tightly, clearly uncomfortable in this environment. Claire gently touched his elbow, guiding him through. Jack sat cross-legged on a beanbag, arms folded, cheeks pink. His teacher sat beside him, looking tired. He hit Liam, she explained. Over a trade gone wrong, it sounds like a sandwich was involved. Claire crouched beside the boy. Jack, want to tell us what happened? He glanced at Daniel, then looked away. He said your sandwiches were weird, and that my dad never makes lunch 'cause he's too busy. Daniel's face changed. Something vulnerable flickered across it. Claire kept her voice even. What kind of sandwich was it? Jack sniffed. Roast beef, but with the crust cut off like how I like it. Daniel crouched down next to him, his suit crinkling at the knees. Did you like the sandwich? Jack nodded, eyes big and wounded. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then that's all that matters. Claire watched the exchange, saying nothing, letting the silence wrap around them like a safety net. It was the first time she'd seen Daniel not as a CEO, but simply as a father fumbling forward. When they left the school, Jack holding his dad's hand and swinging it rhythmically, Daniel walked Claire to her car. Thank you for coming, he said. You didn't have to. I know. He leaned against her car door. I don't know how to do this and run a company. Claire studied him carefully. You're not supposed to know everything. That's why people need people. He looked at her like he wasn't used to hearing things that direct. Then, softer, you're different from anyone I've worked with. I hope so, she said. Otherwise, I've been wasting a lot of effort. She didn't look away, and neither did he. For a second, the air felt warmer than the season called for. That night, Claire got home late. Becca was asleep, but there was a note on the fridge in magnetic letters. Mommy, I'm making sandwiches tomorrow. You can pick the filling. Claire smiled. She didn't need a job to remind her what mattered. But it was something else to be seen, really seen, by someone who thought they'd stopped looking. She stood there a long time, in the quiet of her kitchen, wondering when exactly Daniel Bennett had stopped being just another CEO and started becoming a man she couldn't stop thinking about. By the end of the third week, the office had adjusted to Claire the same way people adjust to weather they can't predict but grow to trust. She wasn't loud, didn't call attention to herself, but things worked better when she was around. Deadlines met themselves. People showed up to meetings already prepared. Emails lost their edge and gained intention. Daniel noticed the difference most in himself. He was still exhausted. Being a parent didn't care about quarterly performance, but he no longer felt like he was treading water in every room he entered. There was space now between the urgency, breathing room he hadn't realized he needed. Claire brought it with her, not by force, just by being the kind of person who didn't ask for your secrets but made you feel safer when you gave them anyway. She hadn't given him hers, not really, but he knew she carried the weight of her own life with grace. He'd overheard her on the phone with her daughter one afternoon, voice soft, eyes full of something he didn't have a word for. The kind of tenderness people forgot to look for in corporate towers. He didn't know why he kept wanting to ask her things, not about work, about herself, but the idea of crossing that line tangled somewhere in his chest. That Thursday, Halston and Pierce hosted a charity gala at the Metropolitan Club. Every executive was expected to attend. Daniel didn't usually stay long, just long enough for photos and handshakes, but this time felt different. Claire had spent most of the week coordinating the guest list and smoothing over a last-minute venue glitch. She'd done it quietly, without ever once making a scene, and everyone now assumed the event had never been at risk. He'd asked her if she'd be going, she'd smiled. "I'll be there, not as staff." Which is why, when she stepped into the ballroom that night in a slate blue dress that caught the light like still water, Daniel froze. She wasn't there to impress anyone, but she was impossible to ignore. He was talking to a board member when he saw her across the room, chatting with someone from finance, her laugh genuine, her posture easy. It was a little like watching sunlight land in a place that had gone too long without it. He excused himself before he could think twice. "Claire." She turned, and the smile she gave him wasn't professional, it was personal, quietly warm. "You clean up well," she said, eyes glancing over his tux. "I was about to say the same," he replied, suddenly unsure of what he'd meant to say. "I figured I should attend as someone who doesn't just fix problems and reroute calendar requests." "You're more than that," he said, and then regretted how quickly the words came out. She tilted her head, curious. "Are you trying to compliment me or confuse me?" He laughed honestly, a little of both. There was a pause between them, stretched but not uncomfortable. He looked past her, scanning the room. "You know I don't usually like these events. Too much small talk, not enough substance." "Exactly," his eyes flicked back to hers. "But you're here, and somehow that changes the math." Claire took a sip from her glass. "Be careful, Daniel, you're starting to sound like a human being." He didn't smile this time, he just looked at her. "Would that be a problem?" Claire studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said gently, "Not if it's real." Later, when most of the guests had filtered out and the orchestra had packed up their instruments, Daniel found her again, this time in the lobby, checking her phone for a rideshare. "Let me give you a ride," he said. She looked up, uncertain. "Not as your boss," he added, "just as someone who doesn't want the night to end yet." She considered him, then nodded once. They rode in silence for a few blocks, the kind of silence that felt deliberate, not avoidance but a kind of listening. "I used to think," Daniel said quietly, "that if I just kept pushing, if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, I could make it all balance. Company, fatherhood, expectations. But it's like trying to win a game where the rules change every day." Claire looked at him, not with pity, but understanding. "I know," she said. "I used to feel like I was holding my life together with thread, like if I let go of any one thing, the whole system would collapse." "And did it?" She hesitated a few times, but I started choosing different threads. He let her words sit with him. "Jack still talks about you," he said. "He's a good kid." "He's figuring things out, so am I," he glanced sideways. "You make it look easier than it is." "It's not easy," Claire said, voice soft, "but it's worth it." He dropped her off in front of her apartment building, a quiet brick place nestled between a bakery and a laundromat. She unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't open the door yet. "You're a good father, Daniel," she said, "even when you don't feel like one." Her words landed deeper than she probably meant them to. "Good night," she added gently. He reached for her hand without thinking, fingers brushing hers just once. "Good night, Claire." She stepped out into the night, and he watched until she disappeared through the front door. He sat there for a while, hands still on the wheel, wondering when exactly she'd stopped being someone he relied on professionally, and become someone he didn't want to imagine the next day without. The week after the gala passed like the quiet after a heavy rain. Nothing dramatic happened, and yet, beneath the surface, something had undeniably shifted. Claire came in each morning like she always did, early, focused, poised. But now Daniel found himself glancing up more often when she passed his door. Noticing the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she always had an extra pen for someone who forgot theirs, the way her presence steadied the air. He didn't know what to do with any of it. Professionally, Claire was still the best decision he'd made since taking the reins of Halston and Pierce. She had streamlined 3 of their top-tier projects in less than a month, restructured communications between legal and product without bruising a single ego, and handled a potential PR nightmare with such grace the board thought he had done it. But personally was different. Because now he noticed the days she wore her hair tied back, the quiet fatigue she carried in her shoulders when she stayed up late reviewing proposals, the laughter in her voice when she took a call from her daughter and tried to whisper but failed. These weren't just passing observations. They were connections, threaded moments he couldn't seem to untangle from his own days anymore. And that scared him more than any fiscal quarter ever had. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything finally came to a head. Daniel had blocked off time for quarterly reviews, but the meetings had run long, and when Claire brought in the printed analytics he'd requested, she found him at his desk, pinching the bridge of his nose, eyes closed. "You've had 3 meetings in 4 hours with no break," she said calmly. He exhaled, "I'll survive." "That's not the bar anymore." He looked up, startled by the firmness in her voice. Claire crossed the room and set the file down. "You're burning out." "I'm used to it." "I know," she said, voice softening, "but that doesn't mean you have to keep doing it." Daniel stood slowly, rolling his shoulders. "What's the alternative? The work doesn't go away." "No," she agreed, "but you're allowed to build something more sustainable. You just haven't trusted anyone to help you do that." He didn't reply right away. Then, with his back to her, "What if I don't know how?" Claire took a breath, walked to the window. "Then start with one thing, one small thing, like letting someone know when the weight gets too heavy." He turned and she was already looking at him, no judgment in her face, just space, just room to be something other than composed. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. "You're not alone in that." Something in the air gave. He stepped forward almost unconsciously. "I think about you," he said, "more than I should." Claire didn't flinch. "I know." That surprised him. "You do." "I see how you look at me when you think I'm not watching," she said. "I hear it in the way your voice changes when we're not talking about work." Daniel searched her face, waiting for rejection, caution, something that would signal a line had been crossed. Instead, she stepped a little closer. "It's okay to feel something, even here, even now." He reached for her hand, carefully, slowly, and she let him. Their fingers laced in a way that felt less like an answer and more like a beginning. They didn't talk about it the next morning, not directly, but the world shifted again in subtle ways. Daniel brought her coffee this time, 2 sugars, oat milk, the way she liked it. Left it on her desk without a word. She found it during a lull between calls and smiled into her sleeve. Jack came by that afternoon with a new drawing, this time of a castle, a tall tower and 2 stick people on the roof. Claire guessed which one was her. Jack shrugged and said, "I just drew what I see." Daniel looked at the drawing longer than necessary. That night after hours, when most of the office had gone home, Claire lingered behind, typing notes from a vendor call. Daniel appeared in the doorway of her office, jacket off, tie loosened. "Hungry?" he asked. She looked up, caught off guard. He held up a takeout bag. "There's a place Jack swears by, noodles and dumplings. I figured we've earned it." She smiled. "I won't say no." They sat in his office, legs tucked beneath them on opposite ends of the couch, food balanced in paper cartons, the city lights stretching out behind them. They didn't talk about work. They talked about books, about music they used to love before life got too loud, about the schools they'd almost gone to, the summers that didn't quite work out, the kids who had redefined what mattered most. It wasn't a date, not exactly. But something lived in that quiet, between bites of shrimp dumplings and the clink of chopsticks. Something real. Weeks passed, they never defined anything out loud. But Claire found herself staying just a little later some evenings. Daniel started blocking off parts of his calendar where he used to cram back-to-back meetings, claiming it was efficiency, though Claire suspected he was just learning to breathe again. She didn't need grand declarations. She didn't need promises whispered in fluorescent-lit hallways. But one night, as she packed up her things, she found a post-it on her desk, Daniel's handwriting unmistakable. It said, "I don't know what this is yet, but I don't want it to stop." Claire ran her finger over the ink, smiled to herself, then turned off the light and walked into whatever was waiting next, the soft beginnings of something more.